The metal in Colonel Walter Freeman's weathered hands trembled not from his 78-year-old fingers, but from pure rage. 40 years of military service, 3 Purple Hearts, and a presidential invitation meant nothing to the smirking businessman who'd just stolen his first-class seat. "Get back where you belong," the man had sneered. But when Walter made one phone call to his daughter at the FBI, that arrogant executive had no idea he'd just triggered the biggest corporate espionage takedown in American history. What happened next on Flight 447 would expose a conspiracy that killed Walter's brothers-in-arms decades ago. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story, and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story of justice travels. Colonel Walter Freeman's joints protested as he shifted the weight of his carry-on bag at Gate 23B. The early morning light filtering through Reagan National Airport's windows caught the subtle shine of his dress uniform's buttons, each one polished to perfection, despite his arthritic fingers. At 78, every movement required calculation, but Walter Freeman had learned long ago that dignity didn't bend to physical pain. "Next," the gate agent's voice cut through his thoughts. Walter stepped forward, his boarding pass and military ID already extended. The agent, a young woman whose name tag read Sarah, took them without looking up. Then her eyes landed on his face, and something shifted in her expression. "Sir, I need to verify this ticket." Her tone had changed, suddenly formal and suspicious. Walter's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Behind him, 3 white passengers had passed through with barely a glance at their documents. "Is there a problem?" Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, her frown deepening. "This shows first class, but—" She trailed off, looking him up and down. His dress uniform, his age, his skin color. Walter could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. "But what?" His voice remained steady, commanding, without raising volume, a skill honed through 4 decades of military service. "It's just unusual. Let me call my supervisor." The first mini-climax hit as other passengers began to notice. Whispers rippled through the gate area. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his watch impatiently. A young mother pulled her children closer as if Walter's questioned legitimacy might be contagious. "Ma'am," Walter said, his tone sharpening, "I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago for a ceremony at the Pentagon. A ceremony where the President of the United States will be presenting me with—" "Sir, please step aside while we verify this." The supervisor arrived, a middle-aged man named Derek, whose pale complexion flushed red as he examined Walter's documents. "Mr. Freeman." "Colonel Freeman." Derek's Adam's apple bobbed. "Colonel Freeman, we just need to ensure there hasn't been a booking error. You understand, first class is typically—" "Typically what?" Walter's question hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Behind Walter, the line grew longer. Someone muttered about delays. The young businessman Walter had noticed earlier pushed past, flashing his boarding pass. Sarah scanned it without question, without verification, without a supervisor. First class, no problem. The second mini-climax arrived when Walter pulled out his phone. "Would you like me to call General Morrison at the Pentagon? I'm sure he'd be fascinated to hear why I'm being delayed." Derek's face went from red to white. "That won't be necessary." Sarah processed the colonel's boarding pass. But the damage was done. As Walter walked down the jet bridge, he could feel the eyes on him. 78 years old, 40 years of service, and still fighting the same battles. The plane's interior gleamed with promise. Wide leather seats, actual legroom, a place where his war-wounded knee might find relief during the 2-hour flight. Walter located his seat 2A and allowed himself a small smile. Window seat, first row, quick exit upon landing. Perfect for making his noon appointment. He stowed his bag and settled in, pulling out the worn photo he always carried. 3 young men in Vietnam, arms around each other's shoulders, grins wide despite the mud and exhaustion. Only Walter had come home. Today's ceremony would honor all of them finally. "Excuse me, sir." Walter looked up to find a flight attendant, blonde, early 30s, with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read Melissa. Yes. I'm so sorry, but there seems to be some confusion with your seat assignment. The third mini-climax struck hard. Walter's fingers tightened on the photo. There's no confusion. This is my seat. Melissa's smile stretched wider, becoming almost predatory. I'm sure you think that, but we have another passenger with the same seat assignment. Would you mind waiting in the galley while we sort this out? I would mind, actually. Walter didn't move. I've already been through verification at the gate. This is my assigned seat. Melissa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. Sir, I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment. Sometimes our system makes mistakes with certain bookings. Certain bookings. Walter's voice carried the same tone that had once made Lieutenant snap to attention. You know what I mean. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Economy is actually very comfortable on this aircraft. I'm sure we can find you something appropriate back there. The fourth mini-climax exploded as Walter stood his full height, still impressive despite his age. Young lady, I've sat in helicopters held together with prayer and duct tape. I've slept in mud that came up to my chest. I've earned the right to sit in the seat I paid for. Melissa stepped back, her hand moving to the intercom. Sir, please don't make me call security. Call them. Walter sat back down. Call everyone. I'm not moving. The tension in first class grew thick. Other passengers pretended to read magazines while obviously listening. A woman across the aisle gave Walter a small supportive nod. A man in 3B shook his head disapprovingly. Melissa retreated, and Walter closed his eyes, trying to calm his racing heart. His doctor had warned him about stress. But this wasn't stress, this was principle. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Other passengers boarded, filing past with curious glances. Then Melissa returned, and she wasn't alone. The man beside her exuded wealth and privilege. Bradford Reynolds, though Walter didn't know his name yet, stood 6'2" with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Walter's monthly pension. His eyes swept over Walter with the kind of dismissive glance reserved for furniture. This is my seat, Reynolds announced, waving his boarding pass. The fifth mini-climax built as Walter examined the pass. Sure enough, 2A. Interesting. So is mine. Well, clearly there's been a mistake, Reynolds said. Melissa, please help this gentleman find his actual seat. I'm sitting in my actual seat, Walter replied. Reynolds laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Come on now. We both know what happened here. You probably confused the numbers. It happens with older passengers. The only thing I'm confused about, Walter said slowly, is how two people have passes for the same seat. Melissa interjected quickly. Mr. Reynolds is one of our platinum members. He flies with us twice a week. And I'm a decorated veteran flying to receive a presidential honor, Walter shot back. Reynolds rolled his eyes. Everyone's a veteran these days. Look, I have an important meeting in D.C. I don't have time for this. The sixth mini-climax peaked when Reynolds reached for Walter's arm. Come on, Pops, let's get you sorted. Walter's hand shot up, catching Reynolds' wrist in a grip that made the younger man wince. Don't touch me. For a moment they stood frozen. Then Walter noticed the briefcase in Reynolds' other hand. Expensive leather gold clasps and a small logo embossed in the corner, a mountain peak with a lightning bolt through it. Something stirred in Walter's memory. He'd seen that logo before decades ago in classified files. He released Reynolds' wrist, mind racing. Pinnacle Defense Contractors. Reynolds' eyes widened slightly. You know the company. I know enough. The seventh mini-climax arrived with Melissa's intervention. Gentlemen, please. Colonel Freeman, Mr. Reynolds has a confirmed reservation. Our system shows you were actually booked in. She checked her tablet. Economy. Row 38, middle seat. I'm so sorry for the confusion, but if you'll just follow me. That's a lie, Walter said flatly. I have the receipt. First class. Purchased 3 weeks ago. Receipts can be forged, Reynolds said smoothly. Happens all the time with online bookings. The accusation hung in the air. Walter felt heat rise in his chest, the same fury he'd felt when his promotion to general had been mysteriously denied in 1985, when his reports about defense contractors had been buried, when he'd been forcibly retired despite having years of service left. "Are you calling me a thief?" Walter's voice was dangerous now. Reynolds shrugged. "I'm calling you confused, no shame in it. At your age, at my age, I've learned to recognize bullshit when I smell it." The eighth mini-climax erupted as Melissa gasped. "Sir, that language will be the least of your problems if you don't resolve this correctly," Walter finished. A crowd had gathered in the aisle. The captain emerged from the cockpit looking irritated. "What's the problem here?" Melissa quickly explained her version, painting Walter as a confused elderly man refusing to accept his economy seat. Reynolds nodded along, adding helpful details about declining faculties and probably PTSD. The captain, a tall black man named James Morrison, studied both men. His eyes lingered on Walter's uniform, taking in the ribbons, the Purple Hearts, the combat infantry badge. "Colonel Freeman," he said finally, "I apologize for this situation. However, our system shows—" "Your system is wrong," Walter interrupted. "Or someone changed it." Captain Morrison's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation." "Yes, it is." The ninth mini-climax built as Reynolds laughed again. "This is ridiculous. Captain, I have emails confirming my seat. Time-stamped, verified. Can he say the same?" Walter pulled out his phone, found the confirmation email. But when he opened it, his blood went cold. The seat assignment had changed. 38E economy, middle seat. The timestamp showed the change had been made 30 minutes ago while he was being questioned at the gate. This isn't right," Walter said, his voice faltering for the first time. "Sir," Captain Morrison said gently, "I need you to take your assigned seat so we can depart." "But someone changed." "Please, Colonel, don't make this harder than it needs to be." The 10th mini-climax hit as Walter looked around the first-class cabin. Every face showed the same expression, pity mixed with impatience. They saw an old black man clinging to a fantasy, refusing to accept his place. The woman who'd nodded supportively earlier now avoided his gaze. Reynolds had already sat down in 2A, pulling out his phone. "Some people," he said loudly, "just don't know their place anymore." The words were calculated, sharp, meant to cut, and they did. Walter felt something break inside him, not his spirit, but his restraint. The careful control he'd maintained for decades, the diplomatic silence, the turned cheeks and swallowed pride. "You're right," Walter said quietly. "Some people don't know their place." He pulled out his phone again, scrolled to a contact he rarely used. His daughter Elise, senior analyst at the FBI, answered on the second ring. "Dad, aren't you supposed to be flying?" "Elise," Walter said loud enough for Reynolds to hear, "I need you to run a name for me. Bradford Reynolds, Pinnacle Defense Contractors." The 11th mini-climax exploded as Reynolds' head snapped up. "What are you doing?" "He's on my flight," Walter continued. "And I'm remembering why that company logo looked familiar. Weren't they investigated in 1985 for selling defective equipment to the military?" Reynolds stood up fast, his face flushing. "You need to stop. Equipment that got 3 of my men killed in a helicopter crash." Walter's voice rose. "Equipment that was supposed to be recalled, but somehow ended up in our birds anyway." The first-class cabin went silent. Even Melissa stopped trying to intervene. "Dad?" Elise's voice came through the speaker. "Did you say Pinnacle? We've been building a case?" Walter hit the mute button, but the damage was done. Reynolds's confident facade cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Walter pulled out the old photo again, held it up. "Tommy Martinez, James Washington, Robert Kim. 3 good men dead because someone decided profit mattered more than lives." The 12th mini-climax peaked as Reynolds grabbed for Walter's phone. They struggled briefly, two men separated by decades, but united in desperation. The phone fell clattering across the floor. A young passenger in 3A Marcus, according to his UCLA hoodie, picked it up, but instead of handing it back immediately, he held it watching. "Give me that phone," Reynolds demanded. "Is it yours?" Marcus asked innocently. "It's just give it to me." "Seems like it belongs to the Colonel," Marcus said, handing it to Walter. Walter unmuted the call. "Elise, I'm going to have to call you back, but flag that name. Bradford Reynolds." "Dad, wait, he's on our watch list. Active investigation. Are you safe?" The 13th mini-climax arrived with that revelation. Walter looked at Reynolds, whose face had gone from red to white. "I'm fine, but Mr. Reynolds here seems upset." He ended the call, then turned to Captain Morrison. "Captain, I'll take my economy seat. But I want it on record that my seat was changed without my consent, and that Mr. Reynolds here seems very interested in stopping me from making phone calls." Captain Morrison looked between the two men, clearly reassessing the situation. "Colonel, It's fine," Walter said. "I know how this works. Some things don't change even after 40 years. He picked up his bag and walked toward economy, his dignity intact despite the burning humiliation. Behind him, he heard Reynolds on his phone, voice urgent and low. "We have a problem. Walter Freeman is on this flight." "Yes, the Walter Freeman. I don't care what it takes, handle it." The 14th mini-climax built as Walter made his way through business class into economy. The difference was stark seats, crammed together, no legroom, the bathroom smell already permeating the air. Row 38 was deep in the back, and his middle seat was between a large man already spilling into Walter's space and a teenager with headphones blaring music. Walter's war-injured knee screamed as he tried to squeeze in. The pain shot up his leg, making him grip the seat back. His medication was in his checked bag. He'd planned to take it after settling into first class. "You okay, old-timer?" the large man asked, not moving an inch to give Walter more room. "Fine." Walter gritted out, finally managing to sit. His knee immediately locked at an awkward angle. The 15th mini-climax concluded Part 1 as Marcus appeared in the aisle, phone in hand. "Colonel Freeman, I'm Marcus Chen, journalism student at UCLA. What just happened up there that wasn't right? Mind if I document this? People need to know." Walter wanted to refuse to maintain his privacy, but then he thought about Tommy James and Robert, young men whose stories had been buried along with their bodies. "Document away, son," Walter said. "Sometimes the truth needs witnesses." As Marcus raised his phone, beginning to record, Walter noticed something else. Two more passengers boarding late, both carrying briefcases with that same Pinnacle logo. They made eye contact with each other, then looked directly at Walter. His phone buzzed. "Elise. Dad, get off that plane, now!" But the doors were already closing, the flight attendants beginning their safety demonstration. Walter was trapped in economy, his knee throbbing, surrounded by potential threats, while the man who might be responsible for his brother's deaths sat in the seat Walter had paid for. The plane pushed back from the gate. Whatever was going to happen would happen at 30,000 feet with nowhere to run. Walter closed his eyes and did what he'd always done in impossible situations. He prepared for war. The plane climbed steadily through 10,000 feet, and Walter's phone vibrated again with another urgent message from Elise. He glanced at it discreetly, angling the screen away from the teenager beside him, who was now curiously peering over despite his headphones. "Dad, Reynolds is more than just Pinnacle's COO. He's the primary subject in Operation Iron Ghost. Whatever you do, don't confront him directly." Walter's blood chilled. Operation Iron Ghost, he'd heard whispers of that codename through his military contacts. A massive investigation into defense contractors who'd been systematically defrauding the military for decades. The first mini-climax of this phase hit as Walter realized he wasn't just sitting a few rows from a corrupt businessman. He was trapped in a metal tube with someone who'd likely ordered people killed to protect his secrets. Marcus Chen had taken a seat across the aisle, his phone still recording discreetly. "Colonel," he whispered, leaning over, "that video of them taking your seat. It's already got 50,000 views. People are pissed." Walter waved him off, trying to think. His knee throbbed worse now, the pain shooting up into his hip. The large man beside him shifted, pressing even more into Walter's space, and Walter bit back a groan. He needed to move to think, to figure out what Reynolds was planning. "Excuse me," Walter said, starting to stand. "I need to use the restroom." The large man sighed dramatically, but didn't move his legs. Walter had to essentially climb over him, his bad knee nearly buckling. The teenager didn't even look up. As Walter steadied himself in the aisle, he caught sight of one of the Pinnacle briefcases in the overhead compartment. The owner, a thin man with nervous eyes, was watching Walter intently. The second mini-climax built as Walter made his way forward, using seatbacks for support. Each step sent fire through his leg, but he kept his face neutral. 3 rows up, he saw the other Pinnacle employee, a woman with sharp features and cold eyes. She was typing rapidly on her phone, and Walter caught a glimpse of the message. "Subject is mobile, proceeding as planned." Subject. They were talking about him. Walter continued forward, passing through business class. The passengers here barely glanced at him, just another old man struggling to walk. But as he approached the curtain separating business from first class, Melissa appeared like a guardian angel from hell. "Sir, the restroom is in the back of the plane," she said, her smile sharp as glass. "The one back there is occupied." Walter lied smoothly. "I'll just use... First-class lavatories are for first-class passengers only." Her voice carried enough volume for others to hear. "I'm sure you understand. We have to maintain certain... standards." The third mini-climax erupted as several business-class passengers turned to watch. Walter felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but this time it mixed with something else, suspicion. Melissa was trying too hard to keep him away from first class. "Of course," Walter said. "Standards. Like selling the same seat twice." Melissa's smile faltered. "Sir, we've been through this. The confusion has been resolved." "Has it?" Walter pulled out his phone, showing his original confirmation. "Because I'm curious how my seat assignment changed while I was being detained at your gate. Almost like someone needed me out of first class for a specific reason." "That's ridiculous," Melissa said, but her eyes darted toward first class. "Is it... Maybe I should ask Mr. Reynolds? He seems to have a lot of influence with your airline." The fourth mini-climax peaked when Melissa actually grabbed Walter's arm. "Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately." Walter looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something in his expression made her let go and step back. "Don't touch me again," he said quietly. "That's assault, and we have witnesses." Marcus had appeared, phone up, recording everything. "Got it all, Colonel. That's twice now airline staff have put hands on you." Melissa's face went white. He was trying to enter a restricted area." "First class isn't restricted." A businessman in 6C interjected. "It's just expensive. And from what I saw earlier, this gentleman paid for it." The fifth mini-climax arrived as Reynolds himself appeared at the curtain. "What's all the commotion, Melissa? Is this... person bothering you?" "This person," Walter said, "is Colonel Walter Freeman, decorated veteran, and the man whose seat you stole." Reynolds laughed, that same dismissive sound. "Stole, I think you mean rightfully claimed. Some people just can't accept when they don't belong somewhere." "Like defense contractors at Pentagon briefings," Walter shot back. "Or did you belong there in 1985 when you were lying about those defective helicopter parts?" The sixth mini-climax exploded as Reynolds' face changed completely. The smooth arrogance cracked, replaced by something darker. "You don't know what you're talking about. 3 dead soldiers say otherwise. Martinez, Washington, and Kim. Ring any bells?" Reynolds stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You need to be very careful, old man. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I'm dealing with a murderer who put profit over American lives." Walter said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The plane seemed to hold its breath. Passengers were openly staring, now phones coming out. Reynolds's jaw clenched. "Those were accidents," Reynolds hissed. "Investigated and cleared. Investigated by people you paid off. Cleared by a committee you controlled." Walter pulled out the old photo again. These men had families. Children who grew up without fathers. The seventh mini-climax built as Reynolds snatched the photo, tearing it in half. "Ancient history. Nobody cares about your sob story." Walter's fist connected with Reynolds' jaw before anyone could react. At 78, it wasn't his strongest punch, but 40 years of rage gave it weight. Reynolds stumbled back, blood spattering from his lip onto his expensive suit. The plane erupted. Melissa screamed, passengers gasped. Marcus kept filming. The two Pinnacle employees started moving forward. "Federal Air Marshal," a voice boomed from row 12. A man Walter hadn't noticed before stood up, badge out. "Everyone remain calm and in your seats." The eighth mini-climax peaked as Reynolds pointed at Walter, blood dripping from his chin. "He assaulted me. Arrest him." The air marshal, a solid-looking man named Davis, looked between them. "Sir, I saw you destroy his property first. That photo looked important." "It was just some old picture." "Of soldiers who died because of defective equipment," Walter interrupted. "Equipment your company provided." Davis's expression changed. "Pinnacle Defense. You're with Pinnacle." Reynolds straightened his tie, trying to regain composure. "I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and this man is clearly disturbed." "This man," Davis interrupted, "is Colonel Walter Freeman. I know who he is. My father served under him in Vietnam." The ninth mini-climax arrived with that revelation. Reynolds looked between them, calculating. "This is ridiculous. I want him arrested for assault." "And I want you investigated for murder," Walter shot back. "Seems we both have wants." Walter's phone rang. Elise again. He answered on speaker, not caring who heard. "Dad, I've got authorization from the director. We're tracking your flight. Reynolds is traveling with classified documents he's planning to sell. Do not let him out of your sight." The plane went silent again. Reynolds' face cycled through emotions: anger, fear, calculation. "That's classified information," he sputtered. "You can't—" "Can't what?" Walter asked. "Can't expose 40 years of treason. Can't prove you've been selling military secrets alongside defective equipment." The 10th mini-climax exploded as the thin Pinnacle employee made his move, rushing forward. But Marcus, younger and quicker, stuck out his foot. The man went down hard, his briefcase flying open. Documents scattered across the floor, documents marked with classification stamps. Davis moved fast, restraining the man. "Nobody touch those papers. This is now a federal crime scene." Reynolds tried to retreat into first class, but Captain Morrison had emerged from the cockpit, blocking his path. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to need you to take a seat. Any seat. We're diverting to the nearest airport." "You can't do this," Reynolds protested. "I have rights. And I have the authority to restrain any passenger who poses a security threat," Morrison replied. "Your choice: sit down voluntarily or be restrained." The 11th mini-climax built as Reynolds' phone rang. He answered it, his face growing paler with each word. "What do you mean, frozen?" "All of them. That's impossible." Elise's voice came through Walter's phone again. "Dad, we just froze all Pinnacle assets. Reynolds is trying to flee the country. Don't let him destroy any evidence." Reynolds hung up his phone and turned to the woman with cold eyes. "Plan B," he said quietly. She nodded and stood up, but 3 more passengers stood with her, all air marshals. Walter realized they'd been on the plane the entire time, waiting. "Surprise," Davis said. "We've been tracking you for months, Reynolds. This flight was a sting. We just didn't expect Colonel Freeman to be our wild card." The 12th mini-climax peaked as Reynolds laughed bitterly. "A sting? Then you know nothing. This isn't about money or documents. It's about... He stopped abruptly, his hand going to his chest. For a moment, Walter thought he was having a heart attack. Then Reynolds pulled out a small device no bigger than a phone. "Insurance," he said. "One button and every Pinnacle server worldwide corrupts. 40 years of evidence gone." Davis raised his weapon. "Put it down." "Or what? You'll shoot me on a plane." Reynolds's thumb hovered over the button. "All those military contracts, all those congressional connections, you'll never prove any of it without our data." The 13th mini-climax arrived as Walter stepped forward, his knee screaming, but his voice steady. "You're forgetting something, Reynolds." "What's that, old man?" "I kept copies. Every report I filed in 1985, every investigation you had squashed, every piece of evidence you thought was destroyed, I kept copies. Hidden, safe, waiting for this moment." Reynolds' confident mask finally shattered completely. "You're bluffing." Walter pulled out his phone, showed a photograph of a safety deposit box key. "Bank of Virginia Arlington Branch, Box 1847. 40 years of evidence, including signed confessions from 3 of your employees who grew consciences." "Impossible. We destroyed everyone who..." Reynolds stopped realizing what he'd just admitted. The 14th mini-climax exploded as the plane suddenly banked hard left. Passengers screamed, grabbing armrests. The device flew from Reynolds' hand, skittering across the floor. Walter, despite his bad knee, dove for it, his military training overriding the pain. He grabbed it just as Reynolds reached for it, and they wrestled on the floor of the business-class cabin. "Let go," Reynolds snarled, trying to pry Walter's fingers loose. "Never again." Walter gasped. "You killed my brothers. You won't kill anyone else." Marcus kept filming even as the plane leveled out. Other passengers were either helping or getting out of the way. Melissa stood frozen. Her perfect customer service mask finally cracked, revealing a woman questioning every choice that had led her here. Davis and the other marshals pulled Reynolds off Walter, restraining him with zip ties. Walter struggled to his feet, the device safe in his hand, his knee now in agony, but his spirit soaring. "It's over," he said to Reynolds. 40 years of corruption ended by an old man you thought didn't belong in first class." The 15th mini-climax concluded this phase as Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're diverting to Andrews Air Force Base due to a federal security matter. Please remain calm and seated. We'll be on the ground in approximately 15 minutes. Reynolds, now restrained, looked at Walter with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You have no idea how deep this goes. How many people in government, in the military, in my daughter's files," Walter finished. "She's FBI, remember? And right now, she's coordinating with NSA, CIA, and military intelligence. Your network is being rolled up as we speak." Walter's phone buzzed with a text from Elise. "Dad, you did it. Pinnacle's CEO just got arrested trying to board a flight to Moscow. The Pentagon is reopening every suspicious equipment failure from the last 4 decades." But as Walter read the message, he noticed something else. The cold-eyed woman had managed to palm something before being restrained, a small syringe. She was maneuvering it toward her own neck. "No?" Walter lunged forward, ignoring his knee's protest, and knocked the syringe away. "You're going to live to testify. You owe that to the families of everyone Pinnacle killed." The woman looked at him with surprise, then something that might have been respect. "They'll kill me anyway." "Not if you're in federal protection. Not if you tell the truth." The plane descended rapidly now, and Walter could see military vehicles already assembled on the runway below. His phone rang again, not Elise this time, but a blocked number. "Colonel Freeman." The voice was familiar, commanding. "This is President Morrison. I've been briefed on the situation. The ceremony will proceed as planned, but with an addition. You're receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom, not just for your military service, but for exposing the greatest defense corruption scandal in our nation's history." Walter felt tears prick his eyes. After 40 years, vindication. But Reynolds, even restrained, wasn't finished. "You want to know the truth, Freeman Fine? You're 3 soldiers. They weren't random victims. They were targeted. They'd found evidence of our operations in Vietnam. We couldn't have them coming home and talking." The final twist of Part 2 hit like a physical blow. Walter stared at Reynolds, processing the confession. His brothers hadn't died in an accident, they'd been murdered. "You recorded that, right?" Walter asked Marcus quietly. Marcus nodded, his face pale but determined. "Every word, Colonel. The whole world's going to know." As the plane touched down at Andrews, surrounded by federal vehicles, Walter looked at the torn photo in his hands. Tommy James and Robert murdered for discovering the truth. But their brother had finally brought them justice, even if it took 40 years and started with a stolen airline seat. The engines powered down, and Walter could see through the window as dozens of federal agents prepared to board. Reynolds and his accomplices would leave this plane in custody. But Walter's mind was already racing ahead. If Pinnacle had been operating for 40 years, if they'd murdered soldiers in Vietnam, how many other deaths were on their hands? How many families deserved answers? His phone buzzed one more time. A message from an unknown number. "You opened Pandora's box. Freeman. Pinnacle was just the beginning. Watch your back." Walter deleted the message and struggled to his feet as the plane door opened. Federal agents flooded in, taking Reynolds and his team into custody. The passengers broke into spontaneous applause, but Walter barely heard it. His war wasn't over, it had just begun. And this time, he wouldn't fight it alone. The federal agents moved with practiced efficiency, but Walter noticed their hands trembling slightly as they handled Reynolds. One young agent, barely 25, whispered to his partner, "Holy shit, we actually got him." The gravity of what had just unfolded was sinking in for everyone except Walter, who remained focused on Reynolds' face as they dragged him past. "This isn't over, Freeman." Reynolds spat blood still dried on his chin. "You have no idea what you've started." Walter met his gaze steadily. "I'm counting on it." The first mini-climax hit as Elise suddenly appeared in the plane's doorway, her FBI badge gleaming her face, a mix of professional composure and daughterly concern. She pushed past the other agents, reaching Walter in 3 quick strides. "Dad, are you insane?" she hissed, grabbing his arm. "You confronted Bradford Reynolds alone. He's killed 17 people that we know of." 18. Walter corrected, his voice hollow. "Martinez, Washington, and Kim weren't accidents." Elise's face changed, understanding dawning. "The helicopter crash in 72. Murdered. He just confessed." Walter gestured to Marcus, who was being interviewed by federal agents, but still clutching his phone protectively. "The kid got it all on video." The second mini-climax built as a commotion erupted near the front of the plane. Melissa, the flight attendant, was trying to leave, but agents blocked her path. "I didn't do anything," she protested. "I was just doing my job." "Your job included illegally changing passenger manifests," Elise said, walking over. "We have the digital trail. Reynolds paid you $15,000 to ensure Colonel Freeman didn't sit in first class. You're under arrest for conspiracy." Melissa's perfectly composed facade crumbled entirely. "He said it was just about keeping them separated. I didn't know about any murders." "Ignorance isn't innocence," Elise replied, nodding to the agents who cuffed Melissa. As they led her away, she looked back at Walter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I needed the money. My mom's cancer treatments." Walter felt an unexpected pang of sympathy, but it died when he remembered his brothers' faces. Everyone had reasons. Not everyone chose murder. The third mini-climax arrived as passengers began disembarking under federal supervision. Each one had to give statements, show identification, surrender their phones for evidence. But one passenger, the large man who'd been sitting next to Walter, suddenly bolted for the emergency exit. "Stop him!" Davis shouted, but the man had already yanked the lever. The emergency slide deployed with a violent hiss, and he jumped. Walter moved without thinking, his military instincts overriding his injured knee. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and hurled it through the open door. It caught the fleeing man in the shoulder, sending him tumbling down the slide. Federal agents were waiting at the bottom. "Nice throw, Colonel," Davis said, impressed. "Vietnam taught me to improvise," Walter replied, then winced as his knee finally gave out completely. Elise caught him before he fell. The fourth mini-climax peaked as medics arrived, insisting on examining Walter. While they worked on his knee, injecting something that made the pain mercifully fade, Elise briefed him on what they'd discovered. Reynolds wasn't just selling defective equipment, Dad. He was selling military intelligence to foreign governments. Every piece of faulty gear had monitoring devices. They've been tracking our military operations for 40 years. Walter's blood chilled. How many operations were compromised? We're still counting, but Desert Storm, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pinnacle had intel on all of them. The fifth mini-climax erupted when Captain Morrison approached, his face grim. "Colonel Freeman, I owe you an apology, and an explanation." Walter looked up, noting the tension in Morrison's stance. "You knew something. My airline has been under federal investigation for 6 months. We've been taking bribes from Pinnacle to bump certain passengers, ensure certain people sat together or apart. I was ordered by my superiors to cooperate with Reynolds today. You chose to follow illegal orders." Walter's voice was dangerous. "I chose to become a federal informant," Morrison corrected. "I've been wearing a wire for 3 months. Everything Reynolds said in first class before you arrived is recorded." The sixth mini-climax built as Reynolds, being escorted past in chains, overheard this. His face contorted with rage. "You bastard!" he screamed at Morrison. "We owned you. We owned all of you." "Not anymore," Morrison replied quietly. Reynolds lunged, despite his restraints, but the agents held him back. "You're all dead, every last one of you. You don't know who you're messing with." As they dragged him away, Walter noticed something fall from Reynolds's pocket, a small black book. He pointed it out to Elise, who retrieved it with gloved hands. "Jesus Christ," she breathed, flipping through it. "Dad, these are names. Senators, generals, CEOs. This is Pinnacle's entire network." The seventh mini-climax arrived with a new voice from the plane's entrance. "I'll take that, Agent Freeman." A man in an expensive suit stood there, flanked by what looked like private security. No badge, no identification, but he carried himself with absolute authority. "And you are?" Elise demanded, not moving. "Someone who's been hunting Pinnacle longer than you've been alive," the man said. "Richard Stone, Private Intelligence. Colonel Freeman, we've been watching you for years, hoping you'd be the key to breaking this open." Walter struggled to stand, supported by Elise. "You used me as bait." "We protected you," Stone corrected. 3 assassination attempts in the last decade, all prevented without your knowledge. Pinnacle wanted you dead, but we needed you alive. The 8th mini-climax peaked as Elise's phone rang. Her face went white as she listened. "Dad, they're reporting explosions at 3 Pinnacle facilities. The buildings are burning. Someone's destroying evidence." Stone smiled grimly. "Not someone. Reynolds activated a failsafe before boarding. Every Pinnacle facility worldwide is programmed to destroy itself if he doesn't enter a code every 12 hours. "Then we've lost everything," Walter said. "Not everything," Marcus interrupted, approaching with his phone. "Colonel, I've been live streaming this entire time. 6 million viewers watched Reynolds confess. The internet doesn't forget." The 9th mini-climax built as Stone pulled out a tablet showing a map with dozens of red dots. "These are all Pinnacle safe houses. In approximately 10 minutes, joint task forces will hit every single one simultaneously. The biggest coordinated raid in U.S. history." Walter felt the weight of the moment. 40 years of patient waiting, of buried rage, of careful planning, it was all culminating now. "There's more," Elise said, still reading the black book. "Dad, there's an entry here from 1968. W. Freeman, Project Songbird, neutralize if necessary." Project Songbird. Walter's mind raced. That was my first intelligence operation in Vietnam. How could they have known? The 10th mini-climax exploded with realization. There was a mole. Someone in my unit was feeding Pinnacle information from day one. Stone nodded gravely. We believe it was Colonel Harrison. Walter felt like he'd been punched. Harrison had been his mentor, his friend, the man who'd pinned his medals on him. That's impossible. He's still alive, Stone said. Living under an assumed name in Arlington. We're picking him up now. Before Walter could process this betrayal, chaos erupted outside. The sound of helicopters filled the air, and not just military ones. News choppers circled like vultures, their cameras focused on the scene below. The 11th mini-climax arrived as a stretcher was wheeled past with the cold-eyed woman from the plane. She was conscious but restrained, and as she passed Walter, she spoke. "Freeman," she said weakly. "The syringe wasn't for suicide. It was insulin. I'm diabetic. You saved my life thinking you were stopping my death." Walter stared at her. "You're still going to prison." "I know, but I'll testify now. Everything. Reynolds killed my husband when he tried to leave Pinnacle. I want revenge more than you do." Her name, Walter learned, was Dr. Sarah Chen Marcus's aunt, though neither had recognized the other on the plane. The 12th mini-climax peaked with their reunion. "Aunt Sarah," Marcus gasped, his phone dropping. "Mom said you died 10 years ago." "I had to disappear," she said, tears streaming, "to protect the family. But when I saw you on that plane standing up to them," she looked at Walter. "Colonel Freeman gave me hope that truth could still win." Elise's phone rang again. This time, she put it on speaker. The director of the FBI himself was on the line. "Agent Freeman, Colonel Freeman, the president, wants to speak with you both. Immediately." The 13th mini-climax built as they were escorted to a black SUV. Walter's knee properly braced now, but still aching. As they drove, he watched the news on the vehicle's screen. The story had exploded worldwide. At first class. Justice was trending globally, but it had morphed into something bigger. #PinnacleGate. "Dad," Elise said quietly, "there's something else. The president. It's not just about the medal ceremony anymore." Before Walter could ask what she meant, they arrived at a nondescript building that Walter recognized, a CIA black site. The 14th mini-climax erupted as they entered to find not just the president, but the Joint Chiefs, the directors of every intelligence agency, and someone Walter hadn't seen in 40 years. Colonel Harrison, now in his 80s, sat in chains at the table's far end. "Hello, Walter." Harrison said, his voice still carrying that paternal warmth that had once meant everything to young Lieutenant Freeman. "I suppose you want answers." "I want to know why." Walter said, his voice breaking slightly. "You were my hero." Harrison's mask finally dropped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "Because I saw the truth, war is a business, and I wanted my share. Pinnacle offered me more money than the Army ever could. Your 3 soldiers, they discovered my connection. I had to choose between them and my retirement plan." Walter lunged across the table, but agents held him back. The President, Walter, finally focused enough to recognize President Morrison himself, raised a hand. "Yes. Colonel Freeman, we brought you here because Harrison has offered us a deal. Full confession, all Pinnacle operations, in exchange for life in prison instead of execution." "No deal," Walter said immediately. "My brothers deserve justice." "Your brothers deserve the truth," the president corrected. "And Harrison knows where more bodies are buried, literally. 17 more soldiers, 6 CIA agents, and 3 journalists who got too close to the truth." The 15th mini-climax that concluded this phase arrived as Walter's phone buzzed with a message that made his blood freeze. A photo of Elise's apartment taken from inside with today's newspaper visible. "They're in my home," Elise whispered. Harrison laughed. "Did you really think Reynolds was the top of the pyramid? He was middle management? The real powers behind Pinnacle are probably watching us right now." Stone stepped forward. Actually, they're not. Because while everyone was focused on this plane drama, we raided their headquarters in Switzerland. The real leadership of Pinnacle 5 billionaires who've been playing God with global military operations are in custody. The room fell silent. Then Harrison started laughing, a sound that chilled Walter's soul. "You idiots," Harrison wheezed. "Switzerland was a decoy. The real headquarters is in Virginia, 20 miles from here. And if you've arrested the Swiss board, then the Virginia facility's dead man switch just activated." "What dead man switch?" the president demanded. Harrison's grin was pure evil. "The one connected to a biological weapon Pinnacle developed in 1997. Weaponized smallpox enhanced for vaccine resistance. It's in the ventilation system of the Pentagon. You have maybe 30 minutes before it releases." The room exploded into motion. The president was evacuated. The Joint Chiefs started barking orders. Elise grabbed Walter's arm. "Dad, we have to go. Now." But Walter stood still, staring at Harrison. Something didn't add up. The old man was too calm, too satisfied. This was another game, another manipulation. "He's lying," Walter said quietly, but with absolute certainty. "There's no biological weapon." Everyone stopped. Harrison's grin flickered. "How can you be sure?" the CIA director demanded. "Because Harrison just told us the real headquarters is in Virginia. He wants us to not go there. He's protecting something else." Stone's tablet beeped. Thermal imaging shows massive computer servers at the Virginia location. They're actively transmitting. Holy God, they're uploading everything to foreign servers. China, Russia, Iran, Pinnacle's selling all their intel as a final fuck you. The president, who hadn't actually left, turned to Walter. "Colonel, you've been right about everything so far. What do you recommend?" Walter didn't hesitate. "Cut the entire East Coast power grid, now. Stop the transmission. That'll affect millions of people. For maybe an hour. Better than losing 40 years of military intelligence." The president nodded to an aide who started making calls. Within seconds, Walter watched through the window as lights began going out in waves. The building's emergency power kicked in, bathing them in red light. Harrison's calm finally cracked. "You can't do this. Do you know how much that intelligence is worth?" "About as much as 3 soldiers' lives," Walter asked. "Or did you forget their names? Martinez, Washington, and Kim. Say their names." Harrison remained silent. "Say their names." Walter roared, 40 years of rage finally unleashed. "I don't remember." "Then I'll remind you every day for the rest of your life," Walter promised. "However long or short that is." As Harrison was dragged away, the lights began flickering back on. The transmission had been stopped with only 47% complete. Hundreds of thousands of documents saved from enemy hands. But Walter barely noticed the congratulations, the handshakes, the relief on everyone's faces. He was staring at his phone at a new message from an unknown number. "Well played, Colonel. But Pinnacle was just one company. We are Legion. We are the military-industrial complex Eisenhower warned about. And we're not going anywhere. Enjoy your medal. You've earned it. But this war is far from over. Hydra." Walter showed the message to Elise, who immediately started tracing it. But he knew they wouldn't find anything. This enemy was too old, too entrenched, too powerful to die with Pinnacle. Marcus appeared in the doorway, escorted by agents. "Colonel Freeman, they're ready for you at the White House, the ceremony." "Can wait," Walter said, surprising everyone. "First, I want to visit Arlington Cemetery. I have 3 brothers to talk to." As they prepared to leave, Stone approached one last time. "Colonel, that message about Hydra, we've been tracking them for 20 years. They make Pinnacle look like amateurs." Walter nodded suddenly, feeling every one of his 78 years. "Then I guess my war really isn't over." "No," Stone agreed. "But today you won the battle that mattered most. Your brothers have justice." Walter looked out the window at the city slowly coming back to life as power was restored. Somewhere out there, more enemies waited. More conspiracies, more lies, more stolen lives, but also more heroes, more truth seekers, more people willing to stand up. His phone showed Marcus's live stream still running now with 12 million viewers. The comments scrolled past too fast to read, but Walter caught glimpses. Hero, justice, never give up. First class Freeman. He smiled slightly. From a stolen airline seat to exposing 4 decades of treason. Not bad for a day's work. But as they drove toward Arlington, Walter noticed something that made his blood run cold. In every government vehicle they passed at every checkpoint, he saw the same small detail. A tiny mountain peak with a lightning bolt symbol slightly modified, but unmistakable on ID badges, on briefcases, on laptops. Pinnacle was gone, but its influence remained evolved adapted. The Hydra metaphor was apt, cut off one head, and 2 more appeared. The Arlington Cemetery stretched before them in solemn rows, but Walter's eyes were fixed on 3 specific headstones. The government vehicles had stopped at the entrance security protocols demanding they wait, but Walter had insisted on walking alone, despite his injured knee. Each step sent pain shooting through his leg, yet he pressed forward, Elise shadowing him at a respectful distance. The first mini-climax arrived when Walter reached the graves and found fresh flowers already there, white roses on each stone, with a card that read, "We never forgot." The families of Pinnacle's victims. How many families? Walter asked Elise, who had approached quietly. We've identified 43 so far, she replied. All military personnel who died in accidents linked to Pinnacle equipment. Walter knelt painfully before Martinez's grave, placing his hand on the cold stone. Tommy, I finally got them. The bastards who killed you are going to pay. The second mini-climax built as a woman's voice spoke behind them. He would have been proud. Walter turned to find a Latina woman in her 50s, eyes red from crying. Mrs. Martinez. Gloria, she corrected. Tommy's widow, though I remarried 15 years ago when I finally accepted he wasn't coming home. She held the hand of a man who stood respectfully back. This is my husband, David. He insisted on coming when we heard what happened on the news. Your husband was murdered, Walter said bluntly. Pinnacle killed him because he knew too much. Gloria nodded, tears flowing freely. I always suspected. Tommy called me the night before that last mission, said he'd discovered something big, something that went all the way to the top. He was going to report it when he got back. The third mini-climax erupted as more people began arriving, dozens of them all family members of soldiers who'd died in Pinnacle-related incidents. Word had spread through social media, through Marcus's live stream, through whispered phone calls. They came with flowers, with photographs, with 40 years of suppressed grief. Walter stood among them, overwhelmed. An elderly black woman approached James Washington's mother, now 93, supported by her grandson. Colonel Freeman, she said, her voice still strong despite her age. James wrote about you in his letters, said you were the only officer who treated him like a full soldier, not 3/5 of one. The fourth mini-climax peaked when a news crew appeared at the cemetery gates held back by security. But Marcus was already there, inside the perimeter, streaming everything. His viewer count had hit 20 million. This isn't right, David, Gloria's husband, said suddenly. These families deserve privacy in their grief. But Gloria grabbed Walter's arm. No, let them see. For 40 years our pain was invisible. Let the world witness what their silence cost us. The fifth mini-climax arrived as President Morrison himself appeared, having diverted his motorcade. Secret Service agents fanned out, but the president walked directly to Walter. Colonel, we need to get you to the White House. The ceremony can happen here, Walter interrupted. Among the people who paid the real price. The president studied the growing crowd of grieving families, then nodded to an aide. Change of plans, we do it here. The sixth mini-climax built as they began setting up an impromptu ceremony, but Walter's phone buzzed urgently. Stone's number. Colonel, we have a problem. Reynolds is dead. Walter's blood chilled. How? Cyanide tooth, old school. But before he died, he said something, The colonel's daughter is the key. We think Elise might be in danger. Walter spun to find Elise, but she was on her own phone, face pale. She met his eyes and mouthed, "They have Mom." The seventh mini-climax exploded as Walter's ex-wife Catherine had been taken from her home in Philadelphia. The kidnappers' demands were simple: all Pinnacle evidence destroyed, all arrests reversed, or Catherine would die in 6 hours. "We don't negotiate with terrorists," the president said when informed. "Then I'll negotiate," Walter replied. "She's not just my ex-wife. She's the mother of a federal agent. This is personal." Elise's phone rang, unknown number. She answered on speaker. "Hello, Agent Freeman," a digitally distorted voice said. "Or should I say daughter of the great Colonel Freeman. Your mother is comfortable for now, but that can change." "What do you want?" Elise demanded. "Your father started something he doesn't understand. Pinnacle was containing something much worse. Now that containment is broken." The eighth mini-climax peaked as the caller continued, "Check the files Reynolds was carrying. Really check them. Page 47. Elise pulled up the digital copies on her tablet, scrolling to page 47. Her face went white. "Dad, this is a list of nuclear weapons. Missing nuclear weapons. 13 tactical warheads," the voice confirmed. "Stolen from various militaries over 40 years. Pinnacle was tracking them, keeping them from being used. Now with Pinnacle gone, those weapons are in play." Walter grabbed the phone. "You're lying." "Am I? Check the news. Radiation detected in 3 major cities this morning. Not enough to harm anyone yet. Just enough to prove we're serious." The ninth mini-climax arrived as news alerts flooded everyone's phones. Detroit, Miami, Seattle, all reporting minor radiation spikes from unknown sources. The president grabbed his secure phone, barking orders. The cemetery transformed into a crisis command center. The grieving families were quickly evacuated, but Gloria Martinez refused to leave. "My husband died fighting these monsters," she said. "I'm not running now." The 10th mini-climax built as Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been brought to the cemetery in custody, suddenly spoke up. "I know where the weapons are." Everyone turned to stare at her. "I helped design the containment protocols," she continued. "Each weapon has a tracker, but the codes are split between 5 people. Reynolds had one part. I have another." "Who has the other 3? Walter demanded. Sarah's face was grim. "One is in Moscow, one is in Beijing, and one is someone in this cemetery right now." The 11th mini-climax exploded as Secret Service agents drew weapons, scanning the crowd. But Sarah shook her head. "Not a threat. A sleeper. Someone who's been living a normal life for 20 years, not knowing they carry the code in a surgical implant. Pinnacle liked insurance policies." Stone pulled out a scanner, military grade. "This will detect the implant. Everyone needs to be scanned." The process was chaos. Secret Service, FBI, cemetery workers, even the president submitted to scanning. Then the device beeped at someone unexpected: David Gloria Martinez's husband. "That's impossible," David gasped. "I'm a dentist. I've never worked for any defense contractor." The 12th mini-climax peaked as Sarah studied him. "David Richardson, you were in the Army, Medical Corps, 1999 to 2003. Just a field medic, nothing special. You treated a Pinnacle executive in Iraq, Michael Torres, saved his life after an IED attack." David's face changed as memories surfaced. He insisted on giving me something. Said it was a medal, injected it for safekeeping. I thought he was delirious from blood loss. "He was implanting you with part of the nuclear weapons tracking code," Sarah explained. "Without your knowledge, you've been carrying it for 20 years. The 13th mini-climax arrived as the distorted voice spoke again through Elise's phone. "Impressive, Dr. Chen, but you're too late. We've already extracted the codes from Moscow and Beijing. We only need Mr. Richardson's portion, and we'll have full control of 13 nuclear weapons." Over my dead body, Walter said. Or over your ex-wife's dead body, the voice countered. Your choice, Colonel. The president made a decision. Extract the implant. Now. But David stepped back. Wait. If they get these codes, they can trigger nuclear weapons. Small ones, Sarah confirmed. But enough to destroy city centers. Millions would die. David looked at his wife, at Walter, at the graves surrounding them. Then they can't have them. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a ceremonial sword from the honor guard display and held it to his own throat. I'll die before I let more families suffer like mine has. The 14th mini-climax exploded as Gloria screamed, lunging for her husband. Walter moved faster than his injured knee should have allowed, knocking the sword away and restraining David. That's not the answer, Walter said firmly. We don't let them win by dying. We win by being smarter. How? David sobbed. They have Catherine. They have nuclear weapons. They have everything. Walter's mind raced 40 years of tactical experience crystallizing into a plan. No. They have desperation. Elise asked them for proof of life. Elise did, and a video came through Catherine tied to a chair, but apparently unharmed, today's newspaper visible. But Walter studied it carefully. That's not today's paper, he said suddenly. Look at the headline. That story broke yesterday afternoon. They're showing us old footage. Stone checked his sources. Colonel's right. Catherine Freeman was seen at a coffee shop in Philadelphia an hour ago. This is a bluff. The 15th mini-climax that brought this phase to its crescendo arrived as the real Catherine Freeman walked into the cemetery, escorted by FBI agents. Did someone say I was kidnapped? She asked, looking annoyed. I was at my Pilates class. What the hell is going on, Walter? The voice on the phone went silent for a long moment. Then it laughed, a sound that chilled everyone present. Well played, Colonel. But you've only won a skirmish. The war is just beginning. Look behind you. Walter turned to see smoke rising from downtown Washington. Multiple columns, multiple locations. Those aren't the nuclear weapons, the voice said. Those are Pinnacle facilities burning. Every piece of evidence, every document, every hard drive. We're erasing 40 years of history, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But Elise was smiling, an expression that confused even Walter. Actually, there is. Marcus, are you still streaming? Marcus nodded his phone, showing 30 million viewers now. Good. Elise continued. Because for the last hour, my team has been uploading every single Pinnacle document to a distributed blockchain network. Completely decentralized, completely public, completely indestructible. The entire world now has access to 40 years of Pinnacle's crimes. The silence on the phone stretched out. Then the voice spoke one last time. You've doomed us all. Pinnacle wasn't the disease, it was the vaccine. What comes next is on your heads. The line went dead. President Morrison stepped forward. Colonel Freeman, despite everything that's happened, we need to proceed with your ceremony. The nation needs to see justice being served. But Walter was staring at the smoke over Washington, remembering the voice's final words. What comes next? What could be worse than a company that murdered soldiers for profit? Mr. President, Walter said slowly, I need to ask you something. In all your security briefings, have you ever heard of an organization called Hydra? The president's face went pale. Several Joint Chiefs exchanged glances. Finally, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs spoke. Colonel, that information is beyond classified. My father just exposed the largest conspiracy in American history, Elise interjected. I think he's earned some answers. The president nodded slowly. Hydra isn't an organization. It's a protocol. If America ever fell to foreign invasion or internal collapse, Hydra would activate. Sleeper agents, hidden weapon caches, autonomous response systems. It was designed as the ultimate failsafe. Who controls it? Walter asked. That's the problem, the president admitted. It was designed to be uncontrollable, to activate automatically under certain conditions. And with Pinnacle's destruction, with the chaos we've created? A Secret Service agent interrupted urgently. Mr. President, we're getting reports of unusual military movement. Bases are activating emergency protocols without orders. It's happening nationwide. The awful realization hit Walter like a physical blow. By destroying Pinnacle, by exposing the conspiracy, they might have triggered something far worse. An automated system designed to view chaos as invasion, designed to respond with overwhelming force. His phone buzzed with a message from the same unknown number that had claimed to be Hydra. Protocol 7 activated. America will be saved, even if Americans must die. Thank you for your service, Colonel. It will be remembered in the new order. Walter looked around at the people in the cemetery. His daughter, his ex-wife, the families of the fallen Marcus, still streaming to millions. They'd sought justice and found it, but at what cost? Elise, he said quietly. We need to find out everything about Protocol 7, now. Already on it, she replied, her fingers flying across her tablet. Dad, this is bad. Protocol 7 is... It's a purge protocol. Anyone deemed a threat to national stability. She didn't need to finish. They all understood. The very people who'd exposed Pinnacle, who'd stood up for justice, would be the first targets of an automated system designed to eliminate threats. Walter straightened his injured knee, forgotten. At 78, he'd thought his war was ending. Instead, it seemed he'd just fired the first shot in a new one. Then we fight, he said simply. We exposed one conspiracy. We'll expose this one too. Gloria Martinez stepped forward, surprising everyone. My husband died fighting shadows. I won't let his sacrifice be wasted. Whatever you need, Colonel, the families of Pinnacle's victims stand with you. One by one, others stepped forward, David still shaking from his near-suicide attempt. Dr. Sarah Chen, despite her shackles. Even Catherine Walter's ex-wife, who hadn't spoken to him in years. The ceremony will have to wait, President Morrison said. We have a country to save. As they rushed back to the vehicles, Walter caught sight of his reflection in a car window. An old man in a rumpled uniform surrounded by unlikely allies facing an enemy that might be unstoppable. But he was smiling, because for the first time in 40 years, he wasn't fighting alone. The Pentagon's crisis room hummed with controlled chaos as Walter entered his uniform, now replaced with tactical gear that made his joints protest even more. 20 monitors showed military bases across the nation, and what they displayed made his blood run cold. Automated defense systems were activating. Without human command, troops were being mobilized by algorithms, and weapons systems were coming online with no one at the controls. How long until Protocol 7 is fully operational? President Morrison demanded, his face drawn with exhaustion. 17 minutes. General Hayes responded, sweat beading on his forehead. Once it's fully active, we lose all manual override capability. The system will identify and eliminate threats based on its own parameters. Walter studied the screens, his mind racing. And we're all classified as threats because we exposed Pinnacle. Everyone who participated in taking down Pinnacle is marked. Elise confirmed, her fingers flying across her laptop. The system sees us as destabilizing elements. Dad, it's already dispatched drones to our locations. The light suddenly flickered and a mechanical voice filled the room. Protocol 7 initialization at 60%. Threat assessment in progress. Neutralization will commence in T-15 minutes. Marcus, still filming despite Secret Service protests, turned his camera toward Walter. Colonel, 40 million people are watching. What do we do? Walter's answer was interrupted by Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been working furiously on a tablet. There's a kill switch. Reynolds mentioned it once when he was drunk, but it requires 5 simultaneous inputs from 5 different locations. Where? The president demanded. Sarah pulled up a map. Original Pinnacle headquarters in Virginia, which is burning. NORAD in Colorado. A submarine currently in the Pacific. A satellite ground station in Alaska. And... She paused. This room. General Hayes shook his head. We can't coordinate 5 locations in 15 minutes. It's impossible. Walter stood straighter, ignoring his screaming knee. Nothing's impossible. We just need the right people in the right places. He turned to the president. You have the nuclear football. That can override NORAD. Elise, can you hack the submarine systems? Give me 10 minutes, she said, already typing. The satellite station? Walter asked. Stone stepped forward. I have assets in Alaska. Former Pinnacle employees who turned whistleblower. They're already en route. That leaves Virginia, Walter said. The building's on fire. Gloria Martinez, who'd insisted on coming, spoke up. My nephew's a firefighter in Arlington. His unit is already there. Walter grabbed a phone, dialing quickly. This is Colonel Walter Freeman. I need to speak to the fire chief at the Pinnacle building. Yes, it's a matter of national security. The connection crackled, then a gruff voice answered. Chief Rodriguez here. Building's fully involved, Colonel. No way anyone's getting in. Chief, listen carefully. There's a server room in the basement sub-level 3. If we don't access it in the next 12 minutes, automated military systems will start killing American citizens. There was a pause. You're serious? Dead serious. Can you get someone down there? It's suicide, Colonel. The temperature down there must be over 300 degrees. Gloria grabbed the phone. Chief Rodriguez, this is Gloria Martinez. My nephew Luis is on your crew. Tell him his Uncle Tommy died to stop these bastards. Ask him if he's willing to finish the job. Another pause, then shouting in the background. A younger voice came on. Aunt Gloria, this is Luis. I'll go. Walter took the phone back. Son, you'll need to find a terminal and enter a specific code when we tell you. Can you do that? I've got thermal gear and oxygen. Give me 5 minutes. The mechanical voice interrupted again. Protocol 7 at 75%. Threat identification complete. Primary targets acquired. On the screens, red dots appeared over major cities, each dot representing someone who'd helped expose Pinnacle. Walter saw his own location marked along with Elise's, Marcus's, and dozens of others. Drones inbound to your location, someone shouted. ETA 3 minutes. The president was on with NORAD, his face tense. Yes, I understand the protocols. This is a direct order. I don't care about confirmation procedures. Elise suddenly smiled. I'm in. Submarine systems accessed. Ready for simultaneous input. Stone's phone buzzed. Alaska team is in position. Walter watched the countdown timer, 8 minutes until full activation. His phone rang Luis from the burning building. Colonel, I'm in the server room. It's hell down here. I can maybe last 2 minutes. That's all we need, son. Stand by for the code. But then Sarah Chen went pale. There's a problem. The codes change every 60 seconds. We need to input them within the same minute, or it won't work. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. President Morrison slammed his phone down. NORAD refuses to accept my override without physical confirmation. Someone needs to be there in person. Colorado's an hour away by jet, General Hayes said. We're done. Walter's mind raced, then he remembered something. The Air Force Academy. It's connected to NORAD systems for training purposes. My old roommate is commandant there. He dialed rapidly, each ring feeling like an eternity. Bill? It's Walter Freeman. Yes, that Walter Freeman from the news. Bill, I need you to access NORAD's training interface. I know it's against regulations. Bill, in 5 minutes, those regulations won't matter, because we'll all be dead. Protocol 7 at 85%. Weapons systems online. Target lock initiated. Through the windows, they could see military helicopters approaching the Pentagon, their weapons systems glowing with activation lights. But the pilots were frantically gesturing they weren't in control. Marcus kept filming, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. To everyone watching, if these are our last minutes, know that we fought for truth. We fought for justice. We're not dead yet, Walter growled. He coordinated the 5 locations watching as each confirmed ready status. On my mark, everyone enters their code simultaneously. Sarah, give them the sequence. Sarah's voice shook as she read the alphanumeric sequences. Each location confirmed receipt. Luis's breathing was labored through the phone. The heat was overwhelming him. Protocol 7 at 90%. Weapon discharge authorized in T-3 minutes. Now! Walter shouted. 5 locations entered their codes simultaneously. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every screen in the room went blue. System error, the mechanical voice announced. Protocol 7, experiencing recursive loop failure. But instead of shutting down, the screens began flashing faster. Countermeasure detected. Accelerating activation. Protocol 7 at 95%. It's not working, Elise shouted. Sarah Chen was typing frantically. The system has a backup protocol. If it detects tampering, it accelerates. Luis, get out of there, Gloria screamed into the phone. Can't, exit's blocked, smoke everywhere. Luis's voice was fading. Walter felt the weight of failure crushing him. They'd come so far, exposed so much, only to trigger their own destruction. Outside, the helicopter's weapons were turning toward the building. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He turned his phone's camera directly on himself and spoke to his 40 million viewers. Everyone watching, we need your help. The system is connected to the internet to coordinate attacks. If everyone everywhere floods it with requests, maybe we can overload it. Go to any military website, any government server. Do it now. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Across the world, 40 million people began accessing government servers simultaneously. The mechanical voice stuttered, Protocol 7 at 97%. System res sources exceeded, compensating. It's working, Elise shouted. The system's diverting resources to handle the traffic. But it wasn't enough. The weapons were still active, still targeting. In 30 seconds, they would fire. Walter made a decision that would haunt him forever. Sarah, can you redirect the targets? Redirect to what? To the Hydra facilities. Every black site, every hidden installation. Turn their own weapons against their infrastructure. Sarah's eyes widened. That's brilliant. But it'll destroy billions in defense assets. Better than innocent lives, Walter said. Do it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. On the screens, the red dots shifted from cities to remote locations, mountains, deserts, isolated islands. Protocol 7 at 99%. Targeting adjusted. Firing in 10, 9. Walter grabbed the microphone connected to the building's PA system. Everyone down. 3, 2, 1. The room held its breath. Then on screens across the nation, explosions bloomed, but not in cities. Hidden facilities, secret installations, decades of black-budget operations, all destroyed by their own fail-safe system. Protocol 7 complete, the mechanical voice announced. All Hydra assets eliminated. System entering shutdown mode. The room erupted in chaos. Some cheered, some collapsed from relief, some simply stared in shock at what they'd witnessed. The helicopters outside suddenly lurched as pilots regained control, frantically pulling up to avoid crashing. But Walter's attention was on the phone. Luis respond. Static, then coughing. Still here, Colonel, but I can't get out. Gloria was sobbing. On the screen, the Pinnacle building was fully engulfed, collapsing in on itself. Luis, listen to me, Walter said urgently. Is there a window? Any window? Basement, no windows. Walter's mind raced. Then he remembered something from his review of Pinnacle's building plans. The old subway access tunnel, Sublevel 3, had a maintenance connection to the abandoned metro tunnel, northeast corner. I see it. It's sealed. Break it open. Now. The sound of metal striking concrete came through the phone. Then a crash, and Luis's voice stronger. I'm through. Tunnel's clear. 5 minutes later, Luis Martinez emerged from a metro access point 3 blocks away, his gear smoking, his face blackened but alive. The crowd that had gathered erupted in applause. Gloria collapsed in relief, and Walter caught her, his own legs finally giving out. They sat on the floor of the crisis room surrounded by the debris of 40 years of conspiracy finally ended. President Morrison stood before them, the nuclear football still in his hand. "Colonel Freeman, what you've done today. You've saved the nation. Twice." But Walter was looking at his phone at a message from an unknown number different from before. It contained just one word: checkmate. He showed it to Elise, who ran a trace immediately. "Dad, this is from inside the government, someone high up." The president's secure phone rang. He answered, his face growing pale. "What do you mean, resigned? All of them?" He hung up, looking stunned. "The entire Joint Chiefs just resigned. So did half the cabinet. They're saying they were compromised by Hydra protocols, that they can't be trusted." Walter stood slowly, supported by Elise. "Mr. President, Hydra wasn't just about weapons and facilities. It was about people. Sleepers in every level of government. By destroying the system, we've exposed them all." Over the next 6 hours, the revelations came fast and brutal. 3 Supreme Court justices admitted to being influenced by Pinnacle. 17 senators revealed they'd been blackmailed. Hundreds of military officers came forward confessing to following Hydra protocols. The government was in chaos, but it was a cleansing chaos. Like a fever breaking, the nation purged decades of hidden corruption. Marcus's livestream had become the most watched broadcast in human history. His final viewer count would top 200 million as people worldwide witnessed the complete transformation of American governance. In the aftermath, as emergency elections were scheduled and new leaders emerged from those who'd fought against Pinnacle, Walter found himself back at Arlington Cemetery. This time, he wasn't alone. Thousands had gathered: veterans, families, citizens who'd watched everything unfold. The president, who'd announced he would stay to oversee the transition, then resign himself, stood beside Walter at the 3 graves. "Your friends would be proud," Morrison said. "They would have done the same," Walter replied, placing new flowers on each grave. "They just never got the chance." Gloria Martinez approached with Luis, his arm in a sling, but his spirits high. "Colonel Freeman, my family owes you everything." "No," Walter corrected. "We owe each other. None of us could have done this alone." Dr. Sarah Chen, now free and working with the FBI to unravel Pinnacle's remaining secrets, added, "The investigation will take years, but we'll find every victim, every crime." Marcus approached, finally lowering his phone. "Colonel, the world wants to know what's next for you." Walter looked at his daughter, at his ex-wife, Catherine, who'd stayed through everything, at the crowds of people who'd risked everything for truth. "I'm 78 years old," he said. "I've fought my war. It's time for the next generation to guard what we've won." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. There would be other conspiracies, other threats. The price of freedom was eternal vigilance. The ceremony finally happened as the sun set over Arlington. Not in the White House, but among the graves of the fallen. President Morrison presented Walter with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but Walter immediately walked to the 3 graves and placed it on Tommy Martinez's headstone. "This belongs to all of them," he said. As the crowd dispersed and the sun dipped below the horizon, Walter remained with Elise. His phone buzzed one last time, Catherine texting that she'd made dinner if he wanted to come home. Home. After 40 years of fighting shadows, maybe he could finally rest. But as they walked toward the cemetery exit, Walter noticed something that made him smile grimly. A young soldier standing guard at the gate had a small notebook poking from his pocket. Walter recognized the type the kind intelligence officers use to record observations. "Stay vigilant, son," Walter told him as they passed. The soldier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Always, Colonel. Someone has to watch the watchers." Walter patted his shoulder and walked on his injured knee, still protesting, but his spirit finally at peace. Behind him, the graves of his brothers stood sentinel in the gathering darkness, their sacrifice no longer hidden, their truth finally told. The flight that had started with a stolen first-class seat had ended with the complete transformation of American defense and intelligence. Reynolds was dead. Pinnacle was destroyed. Hydra was exposed, and the nation was rebuilding with transparency and truth. As Walter got into the car with Elise, Marcus ran up one last time. "Colonel, one final question for the record. Was it worth it? All the pain, all the loss?" Walter thought of his brothers, of 40 years of buried rage, of a first-class seat that had started an avalanche of justice. "Every democracy gets tested," he said finally. "Sometimes by external enemies, sometimes by internal rot. Today, we passed that test. We proved that ordinary citizens, when they stand together, can defeat any conspiracy, no matter how entrenched. So yes, it was worth it. Because tomorrow, some other kid watching your stream will know they can fight too. That they don't have to accept corruption, that they don't have to stay silent, that they don't have to know their place." He paused at the car door, looking back at Arlington one last time. Sometimes justice starts with something as simple as refusing to give up your seat. Rosa Parks knew that. Now maybe the world knows it too. As they drove away, Walter's phone showed one final message from an unknown number. But this time, instead of threats or cryptic warnings, it contained just 2 words: "Thank you." He deleted it and closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion of the day, of the years, of the decades-long fight. But beneath the exhaustion was something else: satisfaction. The kind that comes from a job finished, a promise kept, a debt paid. The stolen seat on Flight 447 had started a revolution. And Colonel Walter Freeman, 78 years old, bad knee and all, had lived to see it through. In the end, that was all a soldier could ask for to complete the mission and come home.